Hey guys, welcome back. We are in the garden today, mostly because it is a beautiful day. We have been so cold here that I actually had to cover some of the plants. We've had some really hard freezes, but we are actually almost 60 degrees today, and I just needed to get out and soak up the sunshine. But I also am just excited to be out in the garden because we are talking all things seeds today and varieties I have loved to grow. I don't know about you, but I have started to do some seed shopping, mostly because I needed to get my onion seeds already ordered because I will be starting those in just a few weeks. Onions are one of those things I start at the end of December, and I really don't get into a lot of my seed starting till February, but we are starting to get into that planning if you have some time. It is the holiday season, but this is the time of year I typically like to do a little bit of seed haul, kind of revamp seeds I have used up. I personally love to seed start because once I get a break from the garden, I get really itchy to see some green. Even though I still have some stuff in the garden, I have broccoli, carrots, cabbage, and this bok choy here, and just various herbs and things. But for the most part, this is definitely my dead season. But I'm very excited to get onions started here very soon. But I have grown a bunch of things over the years. I've started my garden from seed every year I've gardened. I'm going into my 8th year gardening, and the things I have on today's list are things that are tried and true. I've grown for many years, and they're varieties I love and I continue to grow. So I just wanted to make a video today talking about all those varieties because I know I've discussed all of these things throughout the years, but I think it'd probably be easier if you just have a video that you can reference if you are seed shopping or considering it this year. So I will actually also tell you guys 5 different varieties I've pretty much just written off at this point. I really don't plan to grow ever again at the end. But as far as places I like to order, I'll start with that. I order from a variety of places, but there are 5 places that I typically order from pretty much all the time. I really like Mowing Organics and Johnny's if you're looking for any type of organic hybrid. For me, I have started to gravitate toward different hybrids just so I can have a little bit more resistibility with different disease and things I've seen in my garden, and that has worked really well. But I still grow a lot of heirlooms as well, so I like those 2. There's Renees Garden, Baker Creek, and also Botanical Interest. Botanical Interest also has a handful of organic varieties I really like that I can't find other places. Baker Creek's really good if you're looking for like staple heirloom varieties or things kind of out of the norm. I grew pink celery, I think, for 3 years, and I ordered the seeds from there, and it was a super cool thing. I really liked growing that. This next year, I'm actually gonna try doing celery again. I just took a few years off for I don't know what reason. I think it's probably just because I've been limited on space. Pink celery is actually a really cool one if you've never heard of it. But those are my top 5 favorites, and I will also link down below the varieties that I will be talking about and also where I've gotten them in the past if you're interested in the description box. The first variety I have on my list is honestly one of my favorite things to grow, which is the Hale's Best Jumbo Cantaloupe. This cantaloupe not only is juicy and flavorful, they are large. I have had some almost 9 pounds in size. They are typically bigger than my head for the first wave of fruit they put on, and they also produce throughout the whole season. I can typically guarantee to have cantaloupe in my garden July through October, and we had an abundance this year. It was definitely one of my best cantaloupe years, and I have loved this variety so much. The first year I grew them, I actually saved the seeds because I didn't have any other melon in my garden, so I was actually able to save these seeds, and I still have an abundance of these seeds that I have been planting every year. It's honestly one of my favorites, and if you are in a small backyard garden like me and you're looking for the most bang for your buck, I love this variety. I've tried other cantaloupe varieties in the past, and they do perform quite well for me. Cantaloupe does do well here, but the size and the taste were nothing like the Hale's Best Jumbo. Definitely suggest that one. Next up, we have a pepper I have grown, I believe, for the last 4 years, which is the Hungarian Magyar pepper. This is a paprika pepper variety. If you didn't know, paprika powder is typically just different red peppers grinded up into a powder. The one thing I've really liked about this Hungarian Magyar pepper is even if you just have a dehydrator, this pepper is so easy to dry and make into a powder. There's other pepper varieties that will take so long in the dehydrator that I will typically just freeze dry them because it's just a lot simpler. But this Hungarian Magyar is very thin walled and creates a beautiful paprika powder. So even if you only have a dehydrator, or if you're probably going to sun dry them, I think this pepper would also work really great. It's one of my all-time favorites. It dries very quickly. It powders down so great. I don't have any type of clumping issues. I grow this to have a year's worth of paprika powder. It is one of my favorite things to grow, and I highly suggest this one as well. I actually found this variety by typing in Paprika, pepper varieties, and that's how I found Renees seeds. All right, so number 3 on my list is Belstar broccoli. Here where I'm at in Kansas, we have really crazy fluctuating temperatures, and our springs and our falls can really go up and down. For example, our October stayed pretty warm. We even had a few 90s in October, mostly in the 80s and 70s. And then here in November and then early December, we have dropped pretty close into the 50s and mostly the 40s the last like week and a half. And our lows are definitely getting freezing. So we have a lot of crazy temperatures. Also in the spring for me, our springs can get hot quick. So typically cool weather crops are a little tricky for me, actually. I've had a lot of tricky issues with cool weather crops trying to find different varieties that deal well with stress. And that is where this Belstar has performed so well for me. And it is the broccoli variety I typically grow. I have it behind me here and it is actually starting to head up. I started this broccoli, I want to say it was like the last day in June or something like that. And it should be heading up soon. This is just one of the areas in my garden that's typically a little bit shadier. So, and on top of it, it is the time of year that it takes things a long time to grow, but we are starting to get heads of broccoli. But this variety has done so well for me that it's just one of my favorites. I've not had issues with it trying to bolt. I've had issues with broccoli in the past bolting and completely going to seed before we hit June. I have just found that it works really, really well for my environment. And there's a lot of, I think I've tried like 4 or 5 different other broccoli varieties. And the only other one I've had success with was a burgundy broccoli, and that was in the fall season. Any other time I've tried to grow broccoli outside of the Belstar in the spring, I just always had it bolt. So as of right now, the Belstar broccoli is probably going to be one I grow for life unless I move somewhere. All right, number 4 on my list is Paris Island romaine. So I am a big romaine lettuce girl. I have done a few other different lettuces in the past. I've tried to grow butter crunch and iceberg. Iceberg is very tough, especially in my environment. I bet it does better in northern states, but I really just like this Paris Island. It grows beautifully here. I get these nice, beautiful heads of romaine lettuce, and it does pretty well. I will say lettuce can be a little bit trickier for me just because of the cold weather and fluctuations. I have had this lettuce bolt on me, but typically it does pretty well for me and holds on strong unless we're just like kind of really crazy. But it is one of those that has done really, really well for me, and I absolutely love it. The next one I have on my list comes without surprise if you have watched my videos for quite some time now. It is the Goldie Honey Bear sunflower. This is one of my absolute favorite things to grow. They bring me so much joy. If you've never grown sunflowers before, the one thing I really didn't know before really just experiencing them in my garden and being around them more is typically a sunflower has one sunflower stalk or it has some branching. It just kind of depends, but typically the ones that don't branch and they're just your big, tall, beautiful sunflowers, those ones have one bloom and they only really look pretty for about a 1-week period. The one thing I absolutely love about the Goldie Honey Bears is they look fuzzy, so they bring just this beautiful eye-catching attention to wherever they are, but they're about 5 to 6 feet in height and they branch and they are so full. You can use them as a cutting flower, but since they branch, you can typically continue to cut the blooms and have them bloom for about a 4 to 6 week period, depending on just if your garden gets hit with disease or if you get really hot. That's been my case. Sometimes I have them close to about that 6 week to 7 week period, and other times I've had them closer to about 5 to 6 weeks, but they still are a continuous bloom and they are just so gorgeous. They're one of my absolute favorite things, and I have to have them in the garden. It just makes July, like mid to end of July into August, one of my favorite times of the year. All right, so I have to mention a pretty classic staple in this garden as well, which is just a classic Roma tomato. Outside of the classic Roma, I really, really love the Supremo variety, which I have grown for the last few years. I will say one year it did get hit with blight really hard, but it still produced a bunch of great Roma tomatoes for me. A classic Roma the Supremo, and then I also grew one this last year called Inca Jewels. Those three I am growing again this next year. All three of those varieties put on beautiful, nice Roma fruits. They're a little bit more compact, especially the Supremo and the Inca, to where if you have a little bit less room, they do a little bit better. They don't branch like crazy. They don't get super big. The classic Romas do a little bit more than those two varieties do, but I love to make salsa and sauce and crushed tomatoes, tomato products. And if you are looking to grow any type of tomato products, I honestly say don't look outside of the Roma. The Roma is great. It produces so well for me. I have had good seasons and bad seasons of tomatoes, of course, but I still nonetheless have had enough to be able to make products, and I highly suggest getting a classic Roma determinate tomato. Okay, number 7 is one I found this year. I have only grown this variety one time, but I will say I was so impressed, and it was exactly what I was looking for after all of these years. I will be growing it again in 2025, and hopefully it does just as well for me. But cayenne peppers. I have grown so many different cayenne peppers. I think I've grown them every single year, so this will be my 8th year growing cayenne, and it wasn't until year 7 I finally found a cayenne variety I actually enjoyed working with. So if you are making red chili flakes, this really isn't a problem. You can just typically throw the whole chili pepper into a dehydrator and blend that all together, and you're not having to de-seed the cayenne. If you're wanting to make more of a cayenne powder, it's a little bit easier if your pepper isn't as thin-walled, kind of like that paprika I mentioned, but the paprika is still thick enough, it makes the job really easy. There's some cayenne varieties out there that purely are great if you're trying to dry them in the sun or just use them for red chili flakes. They have such thin skin, it is so hard to de-seed them. And I've grown a few varieties where they are so hard, they just rip apart, and it's so hard to de-seed. And I like to make cayenne powder and make red chili flakes. And I also like to use those cayennes when I'm making like hot sauces and things like that. And typically you're de-seeding the cayenne. So I finally found a variety of cayenne called the Red Ember, which is a hybrid variety, but it's thicker walled and it's so easy to de-seed. So if you are trying to cook with these, ferment with these, make sauce with these, make pure cayenne powder, I highly suggest. This is the first cayenne I have found with a thicker skin walled, and it doesn't just rip. I really enjoyed growing this so much this year. It produced really well for me. So it's one of those I was so impressed with this year, and I will definitely be growing again here next year. Number 8 is the Naval carrot, which also I believe is a hybrid as well. So when it comes to carrot seeds in particular, I prefer a pelleted seed. I think it makes it a lot easier to space and direct seed out the carrot to where you're not having to thin them out as much. So if you're looking for a variety of carrot, look for a pelleted. I highly suggest a pelleted seed. All that means is there's a clay coating around the seed, and it's just a lot easier to handle in my opinion. The Naval though has really impressed me. These carrots have done so well in my garden. Sometimes in past years I've had some issues with carrots performing for me. This one has been great. I get these beautiful, bright, big carrots that just are so great. They're exactly what you want in a carrot. Number 9 is the zinnia, but we're talking about the Queen Orange Lime or anything in that like Queen series of zinnia. They are so pretty. You plant a few different ones out and they all look a little different, so then you can put a bouquet together so beautifully. Some might be a little bit more orange, the other ones might be a little bit more red, the other ones might be just a little bit more yellow, but they have such beautiful coloring that goes all together that I've loved this variety so much. I've grown it for the last 2-3 years. I'm starting to not remember how many years I've grown some of these things at this point, but I have loved this zinnia so much. And if you're looking for a zinnia, I think that one is gorgeous and you can't go wrong. Number 10 is the dishcloth loofah. You guys know how much I love growing loofah. I will state that if you are more north than where I'm at, I am zone 7A. I was 6B before they changed everything, and I was growing loofah in 6B. You might have a little bit issues growing loofah. Your season might be a little short. This is something that takes a very long time to grow. I typically start these loofah seeds 6 weeks before I plant them out. 6 weeks before the 1st of May is when I start them, and I typically still have a good amount of loofah green on the vine at the end of the season, but I'm typically able to get a good amount also dry. The plants just will continue to produce and get bigger and bigger, and you have a ton of loofah, but you do need to start the seeds early. If you're more south than me, you might not have to do that. I did try to direct sow the seeds the first year I grew them and had absolutely terrible luck. I think I got like maybe a 4-foot vine. It was awful. But I've had great success with the loofah outside of that. I start them the 6 weeks beforehand and I plant them out. I also will note, pick the sunniest location in your garden for these. They really, really love the sun. And for me, my sun shifts a lot come from spring to fall. So my loofah is in the sunniest location in my garden for that whole season. I think that really matters with loofah as well if you've ever had issues growing it. But it does take a long time, but I think it's just one of the coolest plants you can grow. It is also edible if you didn't know that. It's very much like a zucchini, which is great for me because zucchini for me is very, very hard to grow here. We have issues with vine borer, and we also just have squash bugs like anyone else. And if you're growing organically, those two things are a little bit difficult to manage. I think I might try again this next year. I don't know. I want to grow all the pumpkin, all the squash, all the zucchini, all the summer things, but squash is just hard for me. So loofah is one of those things that's kind of an alternative that tastes pretty much exactly the same when it's young. So if you've ever had issues with growing zucchini, maybe that will be an option for you as well. But that is my top 10. Two other things I wanted to mention at the very end. One is my chestnut red garlic, which we're already kind of past that season for getting it planted. You plant this in the fall. But if you're looking for a garlic variety, that is my all-time favorite. And then I did want to mention the onion variety I have grown as well, which is called the Calabra onion. I have loved this onion so much. I've grown it for the last 2 years, but the reason why it didn't make my top 10 list is simply because this last year I had issues with the curing process, which I think is more of just environmental factors and how I was curing things. But I have successfully cured this onion and had it store for 6 months the year prior. I actually really like this because I'm in an indeterminate zone, which if you don't know, for onions, you have 3 different zones for onions depending on your sunlight day length, and that will trigger the bulbing effect. And for me, in the intermediate day variety, there's not many storage varieties. And that Calabra is actually one of the few I found for storage. So I will be growing the Calabra again for year 3. Those were the seeds I had to get ordered last night. So hopefully I'll have better luck this next year. I'll lightly touch on this. I think a lot of my issue with the onions was a lot of wind damage with rain before they were even curing. If I would have known that, maybe I would have processed through them a little bit faster. But I had beautiful large onions this year and they performed so well for me. So I'm giving them another go because I have been successful with them, but that is why they didn't make my top 10. All right, let's jump into 5 varieties I have pretty much decided I don't plan to grow ever again. If you've had good luck with these, please let me know in the comments below. I am someone that will try a variety a few times before I completely write it off. But a few of these, I really don't know if I'm going to ever grow again. And some of them I've only tried once. And it's mostly just because of flavor. All right, so my first 2 are probably going to be a few that might be ones that people actually very much enjoy growing, but I have not had good luck with. Number 1 is Amish paste. I did not like that variety at all. There was nothing about it I liked. It cracked really, really easy when I had like fluctuations of different rain and I can't control the rain. So I just think that's a variety I will probably never grow again. I have heard of a few other people having very similar experiences with this tomato, but there are also a lot of people that love it, and it's why it's a true heirloom that people continue to grow. So that is just one I don't really like. And another tomato variety, I think at this point I'm going to just completely roll out because I've tried to grow it now for 4 years. It's the San Marzano. It has never done well for me once. And every time I think it might do better for me, and it has not once performed good for me at all. So I think at this point, after trying for so long, I'm just not going to grow San Marzano. I try to play with different indeterminate varieties of tomatoes, and the only ones I've really liked so far are cherry tomatoes that are indeterminate. I don't know. Not my favorite. The next one on this list is one of those Cayenne varieties I mentioned. This one's called the Red Rocket Cayenne. I hated this variety. It was probably the worst variety of Cayenne I have grown out of all the ones I've grown. The walls on it were just so paper thin that The peppers got sun scald pretty easily, and they also just, again, were very hard to work with, so I don't suggest this variety at all. It was not good for me. The next one I have on this list is a variety I grew this year, and honestly, I was so disappointed with it. I don't know. I've had issues growing melons outside of cantaloupe. I think cantaloupe is just one of the easiest melons you can grow. It easily slips off the vine and it is foolproof. So that's one reason why I really love cantaloupe. And other ones like watermelon and then this honeydew variety I grew. The honeydew variety I grew is called Sweet Delight, I believe. The flavor on it was good, but it was so hard to pick that I may have gotten 1 or 2 honeydews out of the 30 plus that I grew that tasted decent. And I mean, I was following all the different cues you can follow for this melon, and it just, I don't know. I really didn't like it. And I was really disappointed by it. And then the last one I have on this list is actually another one I grew this last year as well, which I do need to look up the actual name of it, but this was the poblano variety, and I was not impressed with it at all. I was so excited to grow poblanos for the first time, and I need to look up a few different varieties. Maybe I'll try it again, but I didn't like the flavor on them at all, and they were just a smaller pepper. So at first, my original plan was to use them to make like stuffed fried poblano peppers, and then they were so small I didn't really want to put the effort into doing that. But then I started to taste them, and I didn't like the flavor of them either, because I was going to make them into like a powder or try to do something very similar to the fried poblano that I had planned, and I just didn't like it at all. So those ones are I'm not gonna grow those 5 at all again. I'm sure there's been other things throughout the years as well, but especially those tomato varieties, I really just don't plan to grow ever again. But hopefully this video gave you a little bit of inspiration, or maybe got you a little bit excited to start garden planning. I know as I've been seed shopping over the last few days, I started to get really, really excited for 2025, because I start to get excited about doing things a little different and a little new, and I started to find different color schemes of flowers and such I wanted to plant. So it's so fun having a blank canvas going into the next year. And also, please let me know if you've grown any of these, your experience with them. I think having everyone's experiences in the comments below can really help other gardeners in different locations wherever you are at, because whatever works for me might not work best for you, and that is just the world of gardening. But I hope you guys got inspired today, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.